Thanks for staying with us right here on Sunrise as we continue this morning. According to the data released by Stats South Africa, the population of people living with disabilities in South Africa is over 7.5%, representing 2.9 million. Now, in these days, people living with disabilities are still facing challenges in accessing education and employment. Now, this morning, we take a look at the role that higher institutions are playing in assisting people living with disabilities. To talk more about this, we're joined in studio by Enrico Jacobs from the Belgium campus. And you at home can be part of our conversation by giving us a call on 011 447 1742 or 447 1620. That's on the Joburg area code. And alternatively, of course, you can share your thoughts with us on our Facebook and Twitter pages as well. Good morning to you, Enrico, and thanks very much for joining us this morning. So looking at those numbers that have been mentioned, and just obviously there's a policy around how people with disabilities should have access to all the constitutional rights that we all, have access to as South Africans. But when it comes to education being one of the basics, there are challenges around that. What are some of those things from your experience dealing with the students at Belgian campus have you had to deal with?
Well, yeah, thank you. It's very interesting what you mentioned, these figures, 7.5%, whilst you actually see that only 1% of people living with disabilities actually have access to higher education. The mix at Belgium campus is close to 20% of our students with disabilities, including the deaf, who study at Belgium campus. We see that students do not gain access to higher education for different reasons. It can be financial reasons, it can be the underpreparedness of the students, especially for students who were at special schools before and do not meet the academic requirements to enter higher education. And then at the same time you also have the environment who is not catering for students with disabilities. What you often see is that we all take them disabilities as one lot and we try to put them into education while actually not taking a look at the individual themselves. Are they people with wheelchairs? Are they deaf? They need different environments and you need to cater for that.
Okay, so now obviously as an institution, in this case we're talking of a higher learning institution, it's all about access to education. How do you make sure that you cater for all those different needs so that you can enable them to be able to have access to quality in education?
So it's really understanding your stakeholder, who are they, where do they come from, what are their needs, what do they want, but also how can they themselves contribute to the programs and to the environment. It's important to listen to them. It's important to also integrate them and not to see them as individuals, but rather as part of the larger group. It's also about...
So not to exclude them, but to look as part of a collective.
That's correct. But also taking a look at the able-bodied student, because they often are also not used to working together with the disabled. So how do you make that integration smoothly? And how are you then going to cater in that environment?
You touched earlier on making sure that the students who come from special schools are able to transition from that to an environment that's very inclusive in this case, if that's the correct terminology to use. How exactly do you go about doing that? What are some of the things that you look into?
So from Belgium campus side, of course, it is very important to take a look at the academic level of the student. So it means that we have to take a look at what bridging programs we maybe have to bring in place in order to take them so that they gain access to higher education. It can be on maths, it can be on communication skills, really to take them to that level first. Then thereafter, we have to take a look at what are the other needs that we need. Maybe regarding assessment, we need some more time for them. We need maybe sign language interpreters to work with the deaf students. And not to take that outside the classroom environment, but more in that inclusive classroom where also the able-bodied students are part of, so that they also learn to work together.
Because ultimately, we're going to work together outside of the school environment.
Yes.
Okay, so take us through some of the programs that you have, because a big challenge is you go into you come from a special school, you go into this course, but does the course speak to what you're going to be able to do when you get out of there and try to access employment? What kind of programs do you offer?
Yes, so first of all we offer a diploma and degrees in information technology. it's not just about having a thorough theoretical foundation, but it's also about understanding the business as well. You know, the businesses have their needs. They need to be profitable, they need to grow, they need to be sustainable, they want to be at the forefront. So it's important to understand the environment that the students are going to be employed in. So it's not just about the theory, but it's also about how do you make the theory tangible. And how we do that is basically by involving the industry into our programs, also by making them aware that the employees are not just able-bodied, but also disabled. And it's not just for the sake that we have to employ them, but how do you really make them part of that environment? And that is something that's very important. By involving them and by exposing our students during their studies to this industry environment, we actually succeed.
Now, a lot of companies find themselves, you know, they have to meet the quota of hiring, you know, people with disability, because that's what's expected of them. And then they put together programs like, okay, this is how we can train, you know, people and make sure that we fill the quota of. You say that's incorrect.
That's incorrect, yeah. Often what we see is that the businesses are being led by affirmative guidelines instead of doing real transformative actions. So it's not just about taking a disabled because we have to, because it's the right thing of doing. I think that is wrong. It's really about, you know, partnering with a higher education institution, not just offering a learnership, because what we see with learnerships is that they're often on the lower end on the NQF. They don't lead to employment. So what does lead to employment? So we need to empower all the students, able-bodied and disabled, with these right skills. And you only can do that if you partner with the businesses and the education institution to really transform, to really create, because we've got people with different syndromes. So it's also important, and what we do is we involve educational psychologists, we involve therapists, and those people are very important, not just towards the student, but mainly also towards the academic staff, so that they can basically work together with the academic staff in making these individual programs to accommodate these different learners. That can be learners with, for example, Asperger's syndrome. That can be students who are deaf. So it's not just about the wheelchair or the disabled.
Okay. So finally, real transformative initiatives, you know, and skills development programs that can have an impact not only just to the people with disability, but making sure that they have employment and they, you know, they contribute, you know, to the economy. What can be done?
Well, like you said, it is very important to once someone graduates to be employed immediately, to remain employed, and to add value. So it's not just about a quick fix. A quick fix doesn't work. It's about really more a fundamental look, and a fundamental look towards education, bigger programs, where we work together and make use of all the facilities available, made available also by government, and creating a partnership, what we call basically the triple helix, between higher education, the government,
private sector,
and the private sector at the same time.